Thank you all so much for welcoming me and my team, who've all journeyed from various parts of the country to be here. Thank you to Representative Sampson and to all the state legislators I've met already who have made us feel so warmly welcome. I am the wife of a Mainer, so this is super exciting. So what I'm going to talk about is the Five Freedoms campaign, but I'm going to go backwards a little bit in time to tell you why I dropped everything to come here to communicate with you. I never thought in my life I would be journeying from a New York State under emergency law through Massachusetts under emergency law, ending up in the state of Maine under emergency law. I never thought it in my lifetime because this is not what happens in America. This is not what happens in a free society. And I know how dangerous emergency law is. I want to share that in 2007, I wrote a book called The End of America, Letter of Warning to a Young Patriot. And I wrote this warning because I saw that we were starting to head in a tyrannical direction. And this is not a partisan argument. This is not a partisan statement. The crisis we're in right now so transcends partisanship. Like, this is a time we need to drop. I'm a Democrat, but I would move heaven and earth to speak to you and join forces with you, because this is a time to kind of, we can argue about the things that divide us. Another time, the Constitution is burning.
Yep.
And it's time for us to be winter soldiers together and save this country. So back in 2007, I looked at times and places where democracies were crushed and where tyrants came to power. I looked at Italy in the 20s under Mussolini, Germany in the 30s, East Germany in the 50s, Chile in the 70s, China in the 80s. And what you see is that tyrants always take the same 10 steps. There are 10 steps to fascism. It's a map, and it always works. They always do these same 10 things. It starts with invoking a terrifying internal and external threat. It goes on to creating a surveillance society. It goes on to targeting criticism and critics, calling criticism espionage, dissent treason, or subversion. And finally you get to step 10, and step 10 is where we are now, which is subvert the rule of law, create emergency law. And for 12 or 13 years since I wrote that book, people would say, Naomi, will you tell us when the window has closed? And I promised I would. And there's always been hope. There's always been hope. We've always been not quite there. But now when people ask, I say, we are at step 10. This is it. And what I know from history is that once emergency law is established, there is no going back. Short of things I don't even want to describe in a public place. What happens with emergency law is that soon it becomes too dangerous for people like you and me to gather in a place like this to talk about restoring democracy. So I was also a political consultant during the Gore 2000 presidential campaign. I advised Vice President Gore, and I advised Clinton's campaign in his 96 re-election. And so one thing I saw there is that ordinary people did not have a seat at the table, obviously. And I realized that we needed to have a way for ordinary people to be lobbyists and journalists and to move the dial, because I saw that even good people on both sides of the aisle, and overwhelmingly the people in public service I've met have been good, well-intentioned people, but that they were not supported. There were no mechanisms to support them in making the decisions they wanted to make to serve their constituents, because of the way special interests and money and party and all the things we all know about, you know better than I do, often kept the people from being able to raise their voices effectively and lobby. what is incredibly terrifying now in Maine is that the people can't lobby. The people's voices can't be heard. You know, the state houses are closed. You know, when town meetings are not being held. All the things our founders put in place to allow the people to govern themselves and to speak to their representatives and elected officials have been suspended in states that have emergency law. And this is, like, we're all kind of civilized people, and, you know, America still looks pretty, and our institutions are not visibly on fire, but this is the apocalypse, you know, politically. This is the rubble of democracy, when the people cannot go to a state house, listen to the legislature, when they can't go to office hours, lobby their elected representatives, you know, when they have to lobby through Zoom, as I did at my local town meeting, which is a technology that can switch people off. You know, they can't caucus with their neighbors. They can't assemble in many states. It's illegal for more than 10 people to assemble in the state of New York. This is a stake through the heart of democracy. So, having said all of that, I knew from my life experience that there had to be a digital way for citizens to lobby directly and to bypass all these barriers that were in place even before the pandemic, but are especially egregious now. So we created Daily Clout, and you know, my team is here from Daily Clout, and it's a digital platform. It's nonpartisan. It lets any citizen draft bill, lobby, mobilize support, send existing bills at the state and federal level to their elected officials, to the bill sponsors, through their networks on social media, and it gives them a digital voice. And it's been very, very successful in amplifying the voices of citizens who have used it. In the crisis of this, not the crisis of the pandemic, but the crisis of policies around the pandemic, right? Of suppressing freedom, suppressing assembly, suppressing First Amendment rights, suppressing Fourth Amendment rights, and so on and so on. Citizens moved, and I supported them very much, to launch something called the 5 Freedoms Campaign. And this kind of boils down how to stem the wound of emergency law by passing bills at the state level. That kind of, it's not everything, but if these bills pass, it kind of keeps democracy breathing for another day, for healing and rebuilding to continue. So these are very basic. They're end emergency law is one, and there's been really exciting movement in New Hampshire, for instance, to reform emergency law and then pass bills to prevent emergency law in the future. There's no mask mandates. There's freedom to assemble, whether it's freedom of commerce, freedom of worship, freedom of dissent, protest, assembly, gathering. There is no vaccine passports, and I'll get to why that's so important, and open schools now. And this campaign, I spoke about it on a couple of national news outlets. Sadly for me, my friends on the Democrat side don't talk to me anymore. Happily, however, I've made a lot of new friends, and I keep appearing on national conservative media, so I talked to Steve Bannon, I talked to Tucker Carlson, I told them about the 5 Freedoms campaign, and we're getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of emails and donations and offers of support from across the country and actually around the world, because this suppression is global. So I'm here to ask you to adopt and pass the legislation of the 5 Freedoms campaign, the way, and specifically, we're starting with no vaccine passports, no vaccine discrimination. And I am not anti-vaxxer as a position, however, I am CEO of a tech company. So I understand what these passports will do. And as I've said on a video that has had over 100,000 views, the vaccine passport is not the entry point to a China-style social credit system that will end all human liberty. It is a China-style social credit system that will end all human liberty. I understand that this technology can't sometime in the future merge with your Apple Pay or your Google Wallet. It is merged with it now. Microsoft's model embeds in payment systems so that your income, your revenue can be switched on or off depending on your vaccine passport status. I understand that not in the future, but now a vaccine passport can geolocate you so that all of us with our phones sitting here in this room, if we have our vaccine passports in the state of Maine, the app will know who we're sitting with because the QR code swipes that data where we're sitting here in the Senate or in to the central database that Microsoft or Google or another country will own and hold, because these terms of service do not let you own your own data. It is constantly flowing to whatever big tech company, which by the way profits from the lockdown, owns the data for these lucrative contracts. I know that it has the capability to, as it's doing in Israel already, create a two-tier society where people can't shop for groceries or get their kids into school unless the app says that they can, and it is the easiest thing in the world for dissidents to be identified by government or by the private sector and switched off so that nothing works, or you're always positive for your test, or you're never allowed to fly, or you're never allowed to earn a living, and that is not science fiction in the future, that is right now. Why digital? Let me just end by asking you this. A vaccine passport, because they exist, that you use to cross the border, right? I got like a rubella shot when I was going to India. It's a piece of paper. A piece of paper doesn't geolocate you. A piece of paper doesn't create networks out of your friends, which software exists already, to map all your relationships and merge with payment processing systems. A piece of paper you keep in your pocket. No, they want it to be digital, and the pressure is on. The Biden administration said that they would roll it out. There was so much backlash that now they're saying, okay, we'll leave it to the private sector. But it is rolling out. In California, they're testing it. New York State has the Excelsior Pass. It violates the Americans with Disabilities Act. It violates HIPAA. It violates the Fourth Amendment. Your right to privacy is absolutely illegal. To ask you anything, and the RNs here and the medical people here know this, to ask you anything about your medical status. But that is what it does, and you don't have the choice of using it once it's rolled out. Like when you get on an app, you choose, will I sign up, will I turn it on, will I enter my name and my password? The vaccine passport gives you no choice. All of society can be switched off for you by the vaccine passport. So we're seeing appalling discrimination already forming. We're seeing, universities insist, I won't even get into the mRNA vaccine being experimental, I'll leave that to medical professionals. That doesn't matter, because what history shows us, what the Chinese Communist Party shows us is over and over again, they'll start with just a vaccine. It's not going to end there. Do you have 2 children? We really just want you to have 1 child. We have too many people. We really need you to be sterilized. Have you been sterilized yet? And on and on and on. And so I'm asking for you legislators in the state of Maine to draw the line and show the rest of the country and the rest of the world that Maine will be free. And I'm asking you to please adopt the 5 Freedoms campaign at the forefront of your legislative efforts. I'm asking you, in a dream world, it would be transpartisan. At this point, I don't care. The Constitution needs friends wherever friends can be found. And we're here to help as much as possible if you do decide to move it forward. And I just will tell you as a student of history, if we don't resist now, there will be no future in which we can give our children the democracy that we grew up to enjoy. Thank you so much.